Bilderberg Group documents from their founding meeting in 1954, covered by the BBC a few years ago, reported they wanted to set up the European Union. They said Hitler had failed to take over militarily, that the European Union would be established, and then economically take over the planet. Now they admit the European Union, unelected, the separate group of bureaucrats that control the nations, are now telling the elected members, like Nigel Farage from the UK, part of the European Union Parliament, that he can't criticize Herman van Rompuy. And he joins us now. He's being called in next Tuesday to be chastised. Recap that, Mr. Farage, and you're saying you're not going to apologize to Van Rompuy or to anyone else, and you expect to be suspended. How does that work? How long will you be out of the Parliament?
Difficult to tell. The Parliament hasn't really, the European Parliament hasn't ever really had to deal with anyone like me. You've had the odd person that's made a protest because they wanted to get a particular story aired at a moment in time. But what they've never had in the European Parliament, they've not had a leader of a group in the Parliament who is utterly, implacably opposed in principle to robbing nation-states of their democracy. So, in the past, miscreants have been fined 2 or 3 days' pay, and the odd person has been suspended for 2 or 3 days, but they've never really had anybody who persistently has done this. And as I say, I was called in back in December and told that my behaviour was unacceptable. I called Rompuy and the Foreign Minister, Baroness Ashton, I called them political pygmies, which I thought was, again, a very gentle description, really. But I was told that, oh, no, you must never talk like that again. So I just don't know what they're going to do, but I would suspect that they'll suspend me for a week or something like that.
Expanding on this, for those that don't know, listening in the U.S. and around the world, when you talk about the bureaucrats being unelected, absorbing England, even though your nation's never been able to vote on this, Lord Monckton and many others yourself have talked about as much as 80% of your laws are not even British laws. They're just bureaucracy handed down. Obama's now saying he doesn't care if the U.S. Senate won't ratify and won't go along with the failed treaty and won't pass this bill. He's just going to order the bureaucracy to do it. So this is rule by unelected bureaucracies. But break down the EU model for those that don't understand.
Yeah, the way the EU works is there is a thing called the European Commission, and there are 27 people. Each is appointed, not elected, but appointed by their own member state, and i.e. their own country, and each of them has a job title and a brief. So you have, someone in charge of health and someone in charge of EU expansion, etc., etc. They have beneath them 30,000 bureaucrats, and the European Commission has the sole right within the European Union to propose legislation and the sole right to repeal, amend or change legislation. So what happens is the Commission comes up with a law. It gives it to the Parliament. The Parliament messes around with it. The Parliament can delay it a little bit. And then in the end it gets rubber stamped further down the line by more civil servants. So everything, the way in which our laws are actually drawn up in the European Commission, the whole process is done entirely in secret. The relationship, of course, because with those commissioners and big business, is distinctly unhealthy. And it is a remarkable thing to think that it is the bureaucrats that make law and the parliamentarians that just fiddle around with the implication. And that, in essence, is the model of this system. We cannot vote for commissioners. We cannot remove commissioners. It is the absolute destruction of democracy and the victory of bureaucracy.
So here's a cheap analogy. Tell me if you agree. They're hanging England and the rest of the former sovereign nations at a hangman's gallows, but you get to decide the color of the rope that is put around your neck. You get to decide what color a bullet is painted that's put in a handgun and fired into your head.
Yeah, that's quite a good way of putting it, really. But yeah, the nation-states are disappearing. And of course, already it's not working. The last time I came on your show, I talked to you about Greece, if you remember, and how Greece was signed up to the single currency, and things weren't working. Well, now, this week, we've had a general strike in Greece. We've had the police using tear gas, rubber bullets, all this kind of thing. And a war of words beginning to break out between Greek politicians and German politicians. So even as they've kind of put the finishing touches with this recent treaty they got through, as they've got their new president in Van Rompuy, as they've got their foreign minister in Ashton, even if, as it appears that they've succeeded, actually the cracks and contradictions within the system are showing that actually this empire isn't going to last very long.
The inherent tyranny is there for all to see, and I see polls in Europe every time a country like France or others gets to vote on some new EU expansion. They don't normally let nations even have a vote like England and others. They vote to get out. They don't want it, and I've seen it in Reuters. I've seen reports out of Spain and Greece where government officials are saying big banks, just like Iceland, engineered this collapse. The EU has set it up so that Greece will fully become bankrupt and be completely absorbed into this system. And you alluded to that when you were chastising and calling Van Rompuy out on the carpet a few days ago. Here is a quick clip of that.
I sense, though, that you're competent and capable and dangerous, and I have no doubt that it's your intention to be the quiet assassin of European democracy and of the European nation states. You appear to have a loathing for the very concept of the existence of nation states. Perhaps that's because you come from Belgium, which of course is pretty much a non-country.
Okay, so in layman's words, I mean, you're not exaggerating. This is even in the newspapers all over Europe. The EU is this predatory bureaucracy globally setting up carbon taxes, 45 trillion. You even have fissures within the EU with some of the moral people. The 47-member health board with Wolfgang Wodarg came on the show and said they found out that the EU and the UN were literally getting money from Big Pharma to all of their heads, bribes to lie about the swine flu. So it's just all a giant global corporate system, corporations coming in, banks coming in, and using this government holding company to literally engage in piracy.
Yeah, it all fits together, doesn't it? Hand in glove. You know, the big businesses, the bureaucrats that have the sole right to make laws. You know, it all fits together. They're all very happy with the world they're creating. But the optimistic thing is, you know, whatever happens to Greece, you know, at some point in time, there's going to be a revolution where the Greeks fight and insist to get back their own country and their ability to run it. This stuff, tyranny, you know, it can be an awful thing. It can last for years. But in the end, all these things break up. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that people are waking up to this. And I just don't think that having a single currency for countries as different as Germany and Greece, it can't work. It just can't work. So they appear to have all the cards at the moment, but we're winning the battle of public opinion, and that's just what we've got to do.
Philosophers have said it many different ways, but to paraphrase it, adversity makes men, and easy times makes weak, passive people. And because our ancestors fought so hard in England, the birthplace of the Magna Carta, and in 1776 and 1789 here in the United States, which was the light of liberty for the world, the model against feudalism and all the forms of tyranny and slavery, people got fat and decadent. Now the pendulum swung towards tyranny, and it's creating that awakening and that rediscovery of freedom. And you calling him out, not letting him be the quiet assassin, is devastating them, and they look very afraid of you. Let's talk about his global government comments, because he's really out in the open. You said this week, and I saw it in the news, he's just spouting off about what they're going to do with our lives and how they rule us. Specifically, what was Van Rompuy saying about the global government?
Van Rompuy spoke, and he firstly talked about the need, not just for a single currency in Europe, but for a full economic government of Europe. And that wasn't particularly surprising. He said similar things to that before. But what he said was that he was very encouraged by moves that he'd seen through the G20 and elsewhere, which presumably means the United Nations. He was very encouraged to see that we were now starting to deal with global problems on a global governmental basis. And by that, of course, he means climate change taxes. By that, of course, he means, attitudes towards ultimately tax and spend. So, I mean, this guy, I've never heard anybody inside those EU institutions ever openly talk about world government, talk about global solutions to problems. It's one of those things that's been talked about in the corridors. It is now out in the open, and it just shows you how mad and dangerous these people are, doesn't it?
They're making their move. Nigel Farage, a UK member of the European Union Parliament, will be with us on the other side. We'll give you his party's website. They control the right and the left in England. This is the only real party that has a chance and is winning seats everywhere and really starting to scare the system. We'll be right back.